Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Major roster developments last night, purportedly involving the world champions as well. Rumour has it that with Zekken on the market with all sorts of opportunities for next season, Sentinels may well want to keep him, but other options are certainly on the table. Even NRG, the world champions from just a couple of weeks ago, may also be considering their options. But does this imply something more severe in terms of what some of their players might be looking to do in this upcoming off-season? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. There's so much to get into. I just wanted to shout out this clip, by the way, because the amount of times that I've seen clips like this that say trigger discipline 1v4, trigger discipline 8 or something, and you know what happens. I'm sure we've been here before, and you whiff the first shot, you end up whiffing the second shot, body spamming, and maybe you get one and then you die. But actually to see a clip like this where all four go down was pretty impressive. Now, let's quickly talk Ascension. Governor is heading out there to Brazil, of course, for the Ascension for the Americas, and that's not quite yet underway, at least for the 8 teams that are through to the Swiss stage. What we do have, though, is the Pacific and the Chinese region continuing on. So some big games have continued here over the last couple of days, and notably Nongshim Red Force. So the two key names to really keep an eye on here are the fact that Boom Esports and Nongshim, they were not bad enough to get totally relegated with no chance of a return, but they got dropped down, of course, to Ascension. They've got to fight for their spot back in the Pro League. It's not worked out for Nongshim early on. They went down to Naos 2-0. Of course, it's early days in those groups. They will play a fair few games, as you can see here, but Boom Esports have started out nicely with a 2-0 start there. So if you get to the playoffs, then of course you got the chance to fight. Also, the Chinese region. So yesterday we did see that Simon's team, they got the dub. They 2-1'd Ambitious Legends Gaming on Any Questions Gaming, and Simon was not the top performer this series. His teammates actually stepped up and delivered a good job as well. But yeah, so AQ, as it is, they made it through, and as a result, they're one of the only 4 teams to be in the playoffs in China. And, well, things are actually getting underway. So Rare Atom are playing at, what is it called? Octagonal Disposition. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, can you? Octagonal Disposition Gaming, ODG. So another brilliant Chinese team name. They've won the first game 13-10 on the Sunset. Now that the Lotus is 3-1 for an Octagonal Disposition Gaming and look to run it back. So, you know, wishing them the best. But, you know, Rare Atom, of course, the favourites here. The other key series is DRG versus Any Questions Gaming, right? So DRG, of course, they're the favourites to make this happen. They qualify for the World Championship. They find themselves in this position. They've got to still fight for their spot next year in the Pro League. Of course, they're going to be favoured to do so, but maybe Simon can find a way to take them down. So this is the big series coming up. If Simon were to win it, it would be quite the scale. It's not just about Simon, right? But of course, Simon's the most notable one here because he was on Edward Gaming last year when they won the World Championship. But yeah, DRG certainly the favourites to win the grand final in a couple of days' time. Maybe one of these other teams can do something about that. Speaking of Edward Gaming, there was a bit of drama here because Ethan said, hang on a second, where's NRG's bundle, right? Is it going to be in the store? Are you trying to sell it? Because, let's be honest, we just won champs. Like, can I get some more money in the back pocket? All this. And, well, there was just talk about it because last year after Edward won the World Championship, they featured their bundle in the shop, but which presumably makes quite a big difference when it comes to sales. This year, though, it's not happened yet. So there's been a little bit of talk about why that might be. But the other Edward piece is from many of their other individuals. So Aqua is gone, team manager for the team, and major structural changes. So last year was a bit of a disaster. Well, this year was a disaster, the year before they won champs. The question is, what could they have done differently this season, right? The Simon drama was not ideal, but it's got to be said, that relationship seemed to be somewhat tarnished after all the drama. There was nowhere they could just bring him back, right? So the question is whether Jenny was the right option because they brought in Alphabet Man, then they dropped him, then they brought Jenny back in. And I don't know if many of their decisions were necessarily the correct ones. They did qualify for champs, but they didn't go any further than that. And as Rocket says, Aqua and Juice Flip are gone, and Muggle was gone 2 weeks ago as well. So they've got one coach left, but pretty much everyone else from a structural perspective is out of there, right, for the upcoming season. Let's talk Liquid. Big rumours over the last few days that many of their guys could be out the door. There was talk about Patty Tech, of course, being gone. Talk about Keiko being gone as well. Now, what's interesting here, Nat is to stay. There should be not too much surprise about that. What's interesting is this rumour that there's a conflict of interest. Now, I'm not sure conflict of interest is necessarily the way that I would describe it. I think what it at least is implying is that Keiko, Patitech, and Trex don't want to team together again as a trio. So the question then has turned really to Trex, hasn't it, right? Because people are like, hang on a second. Patty, certainly Keiko, players that you would have expected Liquid to keep hold of, and Trex was fine, but, you know, again, some questions on his ability to get along well with teammates over a decent period of time. So that's kind of the question right now for Liquid. They're looking to do a rebuild. Apparently all of those guys, including Trex, are exploring options. Maybe there's a world where, you know, you could say, well, if Trex was gone, would the rest of the guys be able to get along well and things would be better? Maybe, but also quite possibly maybe not, right? But I think if you're Liquid, do you really want to lose all of those guys? I wouldn't say necessarily. The other big rumour is on Sudak. Sources say that Sudak to Crew is happening. So he was on Loud, then he was on Carmine Core last season, didn't really go to plan. Success proved elusive for the Blue Wall. There's been lots of talk about getting him back to the Americas, and apparently it's going to happen with Crew. So this has been talked for some time that there was a lot of discussion between the two parties. Crew wanted Sudak to come in as their in-game leader again. Makes a lot of sense. I think it would be a sensible option for Crew to go for. The question really is whether it could have happened anywhere else instead, because Bruno Porelleri says that actually Loud wanted Sudak back, but he was already in advanced talks with Crew, and presumably Loud can't offer him anything compelling enough to say no to what Crew are offering him. So this is very interesting, because what are Loud cooking for the upcoming year, we don't really know. But the latest rumour is that they're effectively going to keep their team of 4 for last year, get rid of Robbie BK and bring in Artsan as their new in-game leader. Maybe there was a world where they wanted Sudak in that position instead, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So that's what we understand for now, is that Sudak to Crew, and Loud still trying to figure out what their best options are as they move into some trials. There's another update on T1. So, like, they started the year so well. It was their best year, right? They won Bangkok, but after that it all kind of went downhill. They weren't terrible for the rest of the season, but they never, of course, reached the heights that they did at the start of last year. So Autumn, Indigo, and Cheongak are all out the door for T1 going into next year. They're going to have a major rebuild, again, structurally in a similar way to what we've seen with Edward Gaming. But let's talk about what's happening on the North American side and some of these very interesting developments yesterday. Now, this was the screenshot, by the way, that we did mention yesterday, that Zelsis and Narrate were again appearing in scrims with Sentinels. This one was with Caillou and Zekken. We then also saw Icy and Alim on the other side of Evil Geniuses. So pretty interesting that Icy may not be gone yet. It's not necessarily over yet for Icy. Time will tell, I guess, when it comes to that one. But let's talk about this SOM situation, mainly on NRG, right? But also what's going to happen with Zekken, right? Because Zekken is a free agent. His contract is over. He will be fielding offers. Even if he wants to stay on Sentinels, if somebody else gives him a very compelling offer, he can go to Rob Roy and say, well, hey, they're offering me $5 million a year. Can you match it, right? Now, that's unlikely, but, you know what I'm saying. This is how negotiations will happen. And even there's talk that maybe there's interest in Zekken elsewhere. Let's be honest, on Sentinels, certainly towards the end of the season, Zekken was the only player on that team that I would consider was a world-class player. Again, what world-class is, how many you consider to be world-class is a question, but, you know, I think definitely Zekken could have been considered pretty much all year top 15, top 10 player in the world, somewhere around that kind of ballpark, right? You may dispute that, but I think that Zekken is obviously the player to look at when it comes to that team, and certainly one that they won't want to be getting rid of lightly. 100 Thieves may want him, like maybe Team Heretics would want him, right? Who knows what other franchises might well be interested. Sentinels will certainly have to fight, I think, to keep hold of Zekken, unless he's just so convinced he wants to stay, regardless of what anyone else is offering, that it becomes a no-brainer. But we've seen lots of scrims against Cloud9. I'm not really sure so much why, but you know, we've seen lots of things going on here. We've got, again, they're using funny account names. We've got Gambit Nats, we've got Ardis, 12-8-12-8. But still, Zekken, Kaplan, Zelsis, this apparently scrim was with Gen.G and Redux and Zekken. So it was, yeah, Zekken, Zelsis, Gen.G, Redux with a fifth. Pretty interesting to note. There was also another one. We saw Gen.G, we saw Zekken, we saw Zelsys, all in the same scrim, again against Cloud9, while they're doing their own trials. We also saw this. They were playing someone who was up 14-2. That was Redux. Zekken was in there as well. So Redux has been getting his fair share of trials, it seems, over the last few days as well. But things got very interesting with this reports coming out yesterday from Akamaru. Sources say that NRG are looking for a controller or a flex player ahead of the 2026 season. They are interested in Zekken. Now, this is a very big deal, right? Because let's not forget, NRG just won the World Championship a couple of weeks ago. But is it guaranteed they keep the same team? They certainly wouldn't change their team for performance reasons, right? The only reason why NRG would look to make a change is if one of their players has decided to step away. Now, given the culture they have at that team, look, if, let's say, Ethan got approached by Sen and they were like, hey, we want you as our in-game leader or something, that would never happen. But assuming that that did happen, would you take that offer? Maybe, but even then, given the culture, it's pretty unlikely. I think that NRG would want to stay together. So the only world in which I see a player leaving here is if they're deciding to retire, basically, and they're deciding to step away from the competitive scene. That may be quite likely. And if it does happen, it would kind of be a bit of a shame that it's leaked in this way, rather than just it being announced very shortly after the winning of the World Championship. But it's plausible that Som, especially if they're looking for a controller or a flex player, because Som was close to not coming back at all, right? He wanted FNS to come back to even play this season. He played, he committed, he put his all into it, he's now world champion. Would it make sense for Som to step away from competition now, go back to streaming full time, having achieved everything that he would ever want to in the competitive landscape of FPS esports? It makes a lot of sense, right? So I think it's quite plausible that Som has decided that he might want to just step away. It could be, it could be Ethan as well, right? I don't imagine the other guys. Also Ethan, he may feel that he's had his absolute crowning achievement now. He's set the standard in terms of winning multiple world championships. He could also think about it, but for Som, maybe it makes more sense because he's got the big stream presence and everything that he can step into if he wants to. Now, Som was asked on stream to comment on this, and he has said that he's not retiring. Ethan said that he's not retiring. So, they think they've got more trophies to win, but who knows, really, right? They can say one thing, they may do another, who knows? It's interesting rumor because it's tough to see a world where NRG would be looking for a controller flex player if it wasn't one of those eventualities, right? And of course, despite the fact that Zekken doesn't necessarily play that role for Sentinels, a very flexible, versatile player potentially, NRG could have some pull in those discussions as well. So, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. What will happen next here? Som and Ethan got contracts expiring again. Maybe they're not retiring. Maybe they're getting poached. Maybe Bleed Esports are back with a $5 million bag. But probably a little unlikely on that one. So intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
Read you this. So this is hate messages from PaperX fans just after Toronto finals. Maybe use that effort you use on hating to grow some hair, you actual dickhead circumcised head ass. Just stop being a castor. You are a shit castor. Achilles is miles better than you, lol. #1 PaperX hater, bum ass bitch. Which I read that and I was like, that is one of the funniest.